Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Stellenbosch Business School's online community of practice workshop, our first for 2025. We are thrilled to have you with us. You are joining Anne-Marie Roux and Hamilton Sithole, and we are proving L&D's business impact. Please feel free to pop in the chat where you're joining us from. My name is Kerry Smalley. I'm the Marketing Director at Stellenbosch Business School Executive Development, and we are thrilled to have you with us. Thank you for joining.
I see we've got 81 participants so far, so we'll give it a few minutes just to let a few more people join us before we get started. Hi, Kevin. I see Herla is here from
Hi, Anne-Marie.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Lucinda from the West Coast, welcome. We've got Siwi from Zambia.
Zambia, Namibia, South Africa.
Welcome, everybody.
Kenya. Hi, Grace. Berlin.
Wow, that might take the cake this morning. I'm still giving it a minute or so if everybody's okay. We will start promptly in a minute. I see there's still a lot of people coming in.
Oh, Kenya is representing.
There you go.
Welcome, everyone.
And welcome to all of our colleagues in Botswana and Namibia as well.
Sure, Namibia, yeah. The list, I see the Fashini group is in the house. There's a few hearts coming through, so welcome. Okay, so whilst we're waiting for a few more people to join, shall I make a slow start to our session just to make sure we don't let too many people wait? Welcome everybody, a very warm welcome from Cape Town. My name is Anne-Marie Roux. I will be facilitating, hosting the session on behalf of SBS-ED. This is our first community of practice workshop specifically for our HR and L&D community. So you are so welcome. Just to let everybody know, the purpose of these workshops very much focused on making sure we empower HR and L&D specifically, specifically looking at the leaders across the continent. Our aim here is to make sure we create a safe and a collaborative space where we can all connect, exchange ideas, and kind of like equip ourselves with the latest trends and maybe strategies. This is collaborative, so it is very important for us to hear from all of you. So please make yourselves heard in the chat box, which will kindly be monitored by Jane and the team. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions, please post them throughout. And we will do our best to make sure we guide the conversation to be very inclusive and to be collaborative. So for those of you who don't know why you are here yet, today's topic of conversation, our little power hour, which will go like that. So I just want to manage expectations. We obviously won't be getting to all the questions and all the parts of this conversation, but our focus today is to measure what matters. So the idea is that we measure and demonstrate real business impact, from our learning intervention specifically. So it is very important for us to get those best practices out there. And for that reason, I am absolutely delighted to welcome and to be joined by Dr. Hamilton Sithole. Dr. Hamilton is the Group HR Director of Babcock International, specifically the African division, but he's also a fellow SBS-ED faculty member. So you will see on the screen his full bio, but very experienced in human capital strategy, of course, leadership, business acumen all around. So very distinguished guest, and we are very privileged to have you here with us. So the idea is to get a conversation starter going, and then obviously for you all in the chat room and in the chat box to join in. So without further ado, my name is Anne-Marie, as I already mentioned. I'm also faculty at SBS-ED, and I will be facilitating today's session. So I think let's dive in. Maybe just to set the scene for everybody. Dr. Hamilton, I think it's important for us to create context. Maybe a little bit of an overview on what we mean by measuring what matters, specifically in the L&D context. Any thoughts from your side, just to get everybody into the room from a definition point of view?
Thanks, Anne-Marie, and maybe a warm greetings and warm welcome to everybody. PT, I can't see everyone. I'm used to talking with my hands and fingers. Unfortunately, you can't see all of that movement. But I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion, and hoping that we will share insights and together move forward. Let me just start putting a little bit of a context in this discussion. When we talk learning and development, the reality of the matter is we're talking skills development. We're talking skilling our people, reskilling them in the event that we move in different direction. Case in point right now with AI, or also upskilling them for the future. That's what we're actually looking at. The bottom line of L&D as an overview is we are looking at satisfying business needs. That's the primary focus. Whatever the business needs are, we need to have our people ready for those needs. That's now, that's next year, and that's in the near future. It goes without saying, therefore, that will have to link with some form of a business strategy. So as HR professionals, L&D professionals, we ought to understand what is our business strategies and where can we then prepare our people to be there at that particular moment in time. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah, I hear you focus quite heavily on the business side of it, which kind of like is refreshing, because we tend to talk about the individual first when we talk about measuring what matters. So looking at that, what are we currently measuring versus what should we be measuring? Maybe just high level. And I'm talking specifically to your point from maybe from a business versus an individual perspective, because they seem to have different matrices.
100%. So what we tend to do, and it's been historic, we tend to monitor predominantly governance and compliance. We tend to monitor, has people been trained? What have they been trained on? We monitor how many hours have we spent in training, how many days have we spent in training, how many people we have trained. That's historically what we used to do. Where we need to be looking at is whatever the training that we do, what impact does it have to the business? Yes, we still have to monitor governance, that's okay. However, what matters the most is the impact to the business. And that's where we need to be looking forward to.
Sure, the business is coming through strongly today. I like that, because I think I think it's a slight shift in perspective, and it doesn't exclude the individual, but it almost feels like we, in the words of the design thinkers, we're backcasting. We're starting from a business perspective. Am I right?
100%. What is the name of the game? Why do we develop ourselves? If we are within employment, we develop ourselves so we can add value to the business. Therefore, we should be monitoring what is that value that we add. And that will tell us whether we develop ourselves very well or not. And if there's a gap, we then go back to the individual level and look at those gaps and then provide more development in order to deliver the business ultimate goals. The bottom line is, at the same time, while you're delivering business goals, you are also empowering yourself. You are also developing as a person. So if we split it into three, we're talking individual, we're talking business, and we're also talking career. So it's not necessarily just business all the time, but that's why we actually are employed, so to speak.
Sure. It puts, for me, it puts a lot of focus on us to do our work as leaders from a business perspective to kind of like get the strategic framework right. And because what I hear you say is kind of like it starts with business purpose. It starts with the context is created by why are we here? What is our business? And then that kind of like then makes it easier to align to which people do we need and what kind of skills do they need and what may the gaps be. Am I right?
You're 100%. There's a statement that I normally use that says the skill sets need to support the mission. In this case, we're talking the mission is the business, or even the mission is your personal development. It's not the other way around. We need to have the skill set that support that mission. So you are absolutely right. When we set up that 5-year, 3-year, 10-year business strategy, what is the people component of that? And as HR and L&D community, we need to play a part in identifying that component so that as the business grows, we are also growing our people towards that ultimate business plan or business KPI.
It makes sense. It kind of like gives us a common starting point, if it makes sense. So I see in the chat box, if you can maybe move your mic a little bit closer, you sound a little bit muffled, a little bit muted. So I hope you're on maximum volume, or maybe it's just me who's talking loud compared to you. I have been told, so I'm projecting. Okay, that's fascinating because I think, you know, businesses in today's world, I always say to if I'm consulting, it's the fifth industrial revolution. So the need for agility and the complexity that goes with that it's never been like this. I think it takes a lot from us. So there's obviously huge amount of trends and a lot of mixed messages and diverse conversations around measuring what matters. And I'm thinking, as you are talking, so as the business becomes agile and kind of like tends to try to stay ahead of the curve, obviously, does that then mean, all these trends that are going on, AI is rife, the conversations around AI, the conversations around, the hybrid environments, tech nomads that are, you don't have a consistent team anymore. You don't have those, all the days where that sense of sameness is there, which kind of like alleviated the complexity. So there's macro changes going on, there's micro changes going on. It's all over the place. So I guess my question to you is, are there any trends that are coming through from an L&D and a measuring what matters point of view that kind of like helps us to stay abreast of these changes that are happening?
Yeah, I'm with you. So change is the only constant, so they say. So we are going to continue moving forward in different ways and formats. But let's put it this way. We need to start shifting from presenteeism to delivery. One of the days where I'm on my desk, it's assumed I'm working. Now you have to assume I am working even if you don't see me. So that's a leadership shift. But when it comes to L&D, when it comes to measuring what matters, the bottom line is we've done it before. It's just that we have not actually emphasized that much. We do measure output. We have been measuring output in the past, but for some reason, we are not emphasizing that much on it. We actually still enjoy seeing people working, or let's say, looking like they're working. So going forward with all the change of hybrid working workplaces and also mixed teams as well, we are having to emphasize more output measurements. What have I put to the table? What have I delivered? Can it be seen? Can it be measured? If the answer is yes, then L&D is along with the changes. That's the primary
Sure.
focus.
Yes, that's interesting because I think a lot of contention around qualitative and quantitative stuff in terms of measuring that output. So it's always been easier to measure the stuff we can count, and we tend to lean towards that. And that's why the big salient business measures kind of like easier. What does this mean? The output measuring from an individual, a behavioral point of view. So how do I show up in the world? Are there any things that you can highlight for us that we need to think about?
So we spoke a little bit, and you will see that there's a change in terms of age within workplaces. So the good old days, there was something called loyalty. With loyalty, you didn't have to measure behavior because it almost like came as a package. With the millennials and the new generations, there isn't that much loyalty. However, that type of generation dedicates time to deliver. It is my belief that if you stretch your people to deliver, and they do deliver, worry less about how they do it, because you won't see it. And you can't measure how I smile. You can't measure how I greet if I'm at home. But the only thing that is certain, if I was supposed to deliver 120% of something, and I did 120, 125, that meant inside my heart, I was dedicated to doing it. We're going to get to a space where how people look and how people speak and how people talk becomes far less because we're now working in isolation. But the escalation is, have I delivered the KPIs as was set? That's where we need to be going. Of course, now and again, we go back to the office. When we get to the office, we greet, we reorientate ourselves. That still forms part of behavioral assessment, behavioral overview, just to see that we still can form teams and learn from one another. That should continue.
Makes sense. So we cannot be in this room and talk about measuring what matters without, talking about Gen Zs versus millennials and all the demographical changes. We are in Africa, and as we know, more than 50% of our population is below the age of 18, which means that most of us in this room will either be working for or working with Gen Zs. Any market differences between that? And Hamilton, I see there is still a sound issue, so I don't know. I can hear you, but there are some people in the chat box that says you are a little bit muffled. So maybe it's not coming through that strongly. Maybe if you can pronounce, maybe it's your headset and the pronunciation can be better. Kevin, stop giggling there. I know you are always in the sound check space. You know this so well. This technology platform we are on.
No, yeah,
Increase.
I do. That's better, Hamilton. I think that's much better.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
I've just put all the volumes to maximums.
There we go. So the demographics. Obviously we will see a lot of young people joining our organizations, and I think you mentioned something like loyalty, which I think is very much part of the boomers and the millennials. We come from a place where we almost have an emotional contract with a place of work. So we tend to hang around for 10, 20, 30 years. We're waiting for that gold watch before you move us. So what's going on in terms of measuring what matters in a place where the youngsters are coming through and there's obviously new trends coming with them?
100%, you're right. So we do have an emotional contract to a certain extent. What I foresee going forward is there's going to be a slight shift between that emotional contract and the commercial contract. We are now going to be selling skills. We are selling skills and we are getting rewarded for selling skills. So it's no longer that loyalty. However, I'm not saying by any means that it's going to fall away. We are human beings and we tend to have emotional connections to our colleagues, to our friends, to our businesses. However, commercial contract is going to be even more elevated. What does it mean then from a measurement perspective? Good old days, you knew that somebody's going to stay at work for 4 years. So you tended to just manage that career. Now we expect people to be at work a year, 3 years, maximum 5 years. We now need to start understanding what reskilling means, what succession management means, and we need to be proactively knowing that if something happens in 3 years, 5 years, where is our next skill sets come from? That,
Sure.
from an L&D perspective, will become critical. And what exactly do we need in case of replacement? So there's a slight shift. We've been doing it. It's just that now it gets more pronounced going forward. It's nothing new that we have to do something we've never done before. We just have to be more cautious and more proactive on it now, not reactive at all.
You're right. I think it comes back. Maybe there's a leadership conversation here that maybe we'll need to be more resilient in terms of taking on this change, because I know the bench is empty. The backup in terms of succession, it's one of the biggest risks in some of the big corporates that I consult with. And it almost feels like sometimes we want our bread to be buttered on both sides. It's almost the sense of, we want your loyalty, but when things go wrong, we tell you it's a transactional contract. Yeah, we're not married. This is like you are working here. So you are saying to us that as business, we need to be prepared for the fact that we will have to get that bench filled more often, and that the risk will be that we are not managing 10, 20, 30-year careers here. We are managing people that are here for us for a moment in time, and that we need to look at the way we plan our succession. We need to look at that in a different way.
Completely. They need to be more focused on upskilling, because when you start focusing to the future, somebody who is a lower level now may not be able to step up. But if we proactively put them into that upskilling program, whatever the program look like, we set ourselves at a better space to be able to replace. Currently, we tend to react. When somebody is gone, we turn around who is available, and we start late to retrain. And when we do that, of course, we impact business outcomes. So there is going to be a much more emphasis on upskilling people for the future. Let's take the AI as well. We're saying there's going to be AI. We're saying it's already here. We're saying things are going to work differently. The question is, what L&D programs, what L&D measurements do we have to ascertain that our people will be able to handle AI in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? If we haven't done that, we're already behind, because it's already here. That's where
Sure.
L&D becomes far more critical. That's where the analysis of what we do and how we do it from an L&D HR perspective becomes more critical.
It's almost like you need an academy within your HR, traditional roles, because this seems to, this gap closing will become fast and furious and more continuous than ever before. It's not a once-off, you've been around for 10 years, so we can move on. It's a big ask, and I hope that everybody that's in this room, that you are taking notes, because I think what I've heard so far is that there's a huge focus on making sure you establish context through purpose of the business, because that will give any participant that joins the business an idea of how they can help close the gaps in the business sense in terms of measuring what matters. But then there's also a leadership challenge in terms of dealing with this complexity. And maybe that's my next question is, I come from a school where, if you, even in a hybrid context, even if you have people that are customer facing and they have certain rules and measures attached to how they show up, versus people that might be more in a support function and can work between 2 and 4 in the morning, as long as they deliver an output, to your point, which is outcomes based, and we can measure that. The consistency of managing your team, which in my world kind of like translated to fairness, how are we now consistent as leaders if the rules or what we measure per individual can be so vastly different across generations, across, different roles within your specific team? Is that not going to create a distortion of trust where people will not trust the leadership because there's no so-called fairness in terms of how we measure.
100% I'm with you. Let's take a step back and let's just talk about what does actual fairness at work means. Fairness does not mean you've done the same thing to me as you've done to Anna Marie. That's not fairness. We need to be looking at fairness as the context of our guiding principles, the employment legislation, our policies are adhered to. So in those policies, we have a flexibility and right to actually treat people differently. So if you are at level 1 of skills, I'm going to invest more for you to get you to level 2. If you're at level 2 at skills, I'm going to invest a little bit for you to get to level 3. 2 rand here and 5 rand there does not mean it's unfair. So we need to understand that fairness is not same. Fairness means consistent application of guiding principles and guiding rules. Therefore, there is nothing wrong in if I'm working in the office and somebody is working at home and we are being treated differently and we're being paid differently and we're delivering differently. That doesn't mean unfair. It simply means application of rules is consistent. So we need to understand that difference before we deal with the question of fairness. So there shouldn't be any issue. The fact that we're going with a hybrid, the fact that it's multitude of different people and it's different approaches to individuals shouldn't create unfairness as long as legislation is applied, policies are adhered to consistently.
It makes intellectual sense, completely makes intellectual sense. Yet there's almost this element of, I come from this, it's easier to do it. You know, it's almost like forming a production line in the way we measure our people. So it's almost like we're pushing the complexity back to leadership to say, you will have to have your ducks in a row because the gaps from the individuals are different. Therefore, you cannot really measure the same things because what they are growing at the rate that they are developing and what their development plans look like and, you know, their career trajectory, it's all different. So you will have to take the variety on the chin, and the consistency comes from kind of like being consistent about following legislation and purpose and making sure that everybody feels that they are witnessed in terms of their journey, if that makes sense.
100%. So transformational leadership is going to become key because there's nothing that's going to remain the same from tomorrow to the next day. You're absolutely right. We will treat people differently. We will honor them, we will respect them, and that's what leadership is all about. One primary responsibility for a leader is providing direction. So these policies, yes, we're pushing upwards as employees to say, provide direction. What are the guiding principles of this employment relationship? So what is L&D policy saying when it comes to developing people and monitoring that people are actually being developed and the programs are added into the business? That's a business requirement. There's a leadership requirement to put in place. And then we socialize that to our employees so they understand, let's say, the game, the rules of the game, so to speak. It is a leadership function. Story for another day in totality, but
it's a big one.
It's a leadership responsibility to set up that direction and take the employees with.
Yeah. So something I've also wondered about, I see Jane posted a comment in the chat box that, you know, from an L&D perspective specifically, an HR perspective, we tend to, we come from a history where we were not necessarily strategic partners in the business. We were handed a strategic document to say, how do we, you know, resource this from a people point of view and make sure that we have the right people at the right time with the right skills. Is that something that's changing in the future? This whole way of looking at almost getting a little bit upstream in terms of where L&D and the HR conversation around measuring what matters features.
You're right. So we've cried for years to get into the boardroom. Am I still audible?
Yes, you are. Still muffled, but you're there.
I'm looking at Kevin. If he's nodding, then I'm okay. We fought
Poor
so
Kevin
hard.
is our sound engineer today.
We fought so hard to get into the boardroom, to get into the table from an HR perspective. And now we are there. I think it's no longer about transition. We are there already. Now it's about human resources ability to operate in the boardroom. It's not about getting a strategy document and go implement it. It's about building a strategy document together with the executive team. At that particular point in time, all debates to be on the table. How are we going to resolve? How are we going to develop people? What type of skill sets are we looking for? What is the culture of the organization? So we can recruit correctly. We are there from an HR perspective. However, there's still a lot to be done from development, understanding business. Without offending anyone, it works better for a business person to have a toolbox called human resources. So you understand business, and then you take your toolbox to put a spanner, which is called human resources L&D, and then you run business. It works
More
better.
business people in HR. There we go. There's
That's the idea.
opportunity.
That's the idea. So I know sometimes as professionals, we stick with our professional line, but we need to get to a stage where as professionals in human resources, but we ought to be business-minded people so that our initiatives speak to the business. They don't speak to just human resources as a standalone profession, but speaks into the business. That's the change we need to be seeing going forward from the HR and L&D fraternity.
It makes sense because also from a design and a systems thinking point of view, if you use some of those tools to design strategy, it's almost like we wait too long to get the measures that matters in. We wait until the strategies first, then the resourcing, and then we measure. And by that time, you find that you have designed the wrong thing beautifully, in terms of getting to those measures. So it's almost like you need to do the two in conjunction and get upstream with all of it. So the conversation around the people agenda and the conversation around making sure where we are at and where we want to be, closing those gaps happen before the time. I love that. It makes sense. Jane, I can see there's a lot of chats running. Anything that jumps from the chat box that has come through quite a few times, so we can see if we can make it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So there are quite a few comments that have come in previously, but if we stick with this current conversation, if we may, Pumi had a very interesting comment where she talks about the emphasis on the business needs and us asking the question as L&D practitioners that whether it's a support function or an enabler of business, and how can the L&D professionals within that business environment understand the business, and how do we differentiate between us as practitioners and business people? And I think
it's a big one. Yeah,
yes,
I get the drift, and I think
yeah.
maybe to consolidate that, Jane, Pumi, with your permission, it's almost like the shift. Traditionally, we looked at the individual, we looked at the learning and development plan, we identified the gaps. And what I'm hearing you say, Dr. Hamilton, is we're flipping the coin a little bit to say where the business is at. Do you want to expand on that based on Pumi's comments there?
So let me just try and see if I can give Pumi a personal one-line answer. Gone are the days of supporting function. All functions within the business are supporting functions. Manufacturing is a supporting function. Sales is a supporting function. IT, finance, they're all supporting functions. We are all supporting functions. However, the key part moving forward for human resources is we are an enabler. We enable the business to deliver. If we stop doing what we do, the business will stop. So it's not about support. It's about enabling the business. So what we ought to be doing is saying, business, what is it that you want to do? Business says, I want to have a revenue of X, I want to have a profit of Y, I want to have a cash of Z. Okay, what skill set can we give you to do this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's go find the skill set, let's go develop people. That development plan talks exactly to what the business needs. That's enablement. That's not supporting, that's enablement. right? Supporting is more human resources when people cry and you have to give them be well. And that's support. But when we talk L&D programs, we are actually enabling the business. And we, as a HR L&D, we need to change that thinking internally first ourselves and come across as an enabler, not as a supporter.
That makes 100% sense. Now, obviously in this chat, in this room today, we have people from various sectors. We've got people with very different sizes of business. We've got entrepreneurs, I can see them in the room. We've got family businesses where there's a father and a son or a few children. We've got SMMEs, and then obviously there's the big corporates that are big supporters of these conversations we have. Looking at all of that diversity in the room specifically, are there any differences in terms of the size of your business or maybe the sector that you are in? Because contextually, I understand what you are saying, that we are kind of like sitting with a situation where the business determines the needs, and that is where we resource, and that's where the gaps are formed. Any common trends or any maybe observe differences between these different areas, or do you think there's some patterns that we can highlight that will be helpful?
Thanks, Anna-Marie. The truth of the matter is principles remain the same.
Okay.
It's a question of magnitude of each. Even a family business has got some form of a plan what they want to achieve. And if it's family members or external employees, they still have to have skill sets to deliver whatever the family wants to achieve. An entrepreneur has a plan. Whoever he or she is hiring has got a skill set requirement. So it's just a question of magnitude. So I will have to train less people, I have to train more people depending on the size of my business. I will have to train certain different sets of skills for different industries. However, it all departs from the same sort of mentality. What is it that the business intends to achieve? The business wants to achieve why, therefore we need all of these enablers to deliver that. So there isn't really a fundamental difference. It should just be set of skills for different industry. It will also just be number of people.
Oh, that is fine.
And
That is not
the
good. I'm talking
quality.
about the one that
The
not even.
Is there somebody in the chat box? There we go.
Sorry about
Okay.
that.
No worries.
Cool.
Okay, so you're saying
similar.
the principles are similar. So clearly we acknowledge here, and this, Jane, maybe refers to the comment you just posted in the chat box, that the principles might be the same, but maybe the smaller the business, the more difficult it might be to get and extract that data and to be able to measure that, because your resources are limited. So you don't maybe have the technology that helps you to measure those critical points. You may be constrained in terms of, whatever. So is there any tips and tools? And I'm specifically interested in, again, the behavioral versus because quantitatively certain succinct measures will always be, the salient ones will always be there. But is there any help we can, or any guidance we can give for people that might have limited or unreliable data based on the size of that specific business?
I know it's difficult to believe what I'm going to say, but it's true. There's such big businesses who are still working on Excel spreadsheets to monitor people.
I know. I'm giggling inside.
And it does work. I think sometimes we over-engineer things and we measure too many and we do not interpret. And that's what the challenge is. My advice is smaller businesses, not enough cash to spend to get super duper systems. Do not measure too much. Measure the first 5, 6 that are business critical, and the spreadsheet does work. The other thing, when it comes to observations, for me, observations work far more better in most cases than having to fill in a form and tell me what you think and tell me how you think and so on. if we are small enough, we need to be able, from a leadership perspective, to be in touch with our people as frequently as possible. That actually tells you what needs to be done, what developments needs to happen. The other critical thing is it's still a leadership responsibility to set up the culture of learning. If you do not have the culture of learning, it's difficult, even if you have a 10 million rand system that you want to do L&D with and not L&D. If you do not have a learning culture in organization, it becomes wasted investment. So if you're still small, ensure that you've got learning culture in organization. And when you build that, it becomes easy to manage from a spreadsheet. It becomes easy to manage from observation, more so than the system. And then you can grow with your business and grow your systems with your business.
Makes sense.
And
Thank you for that. I think, yes, Jane.
sorry, if I may jump in, I think thank you for discussing the how. I'd like to take a couple of steps back to some comments that were posted earlier on. There were a number of people that wanted to address the importance of the what. So how and what are we assessing here? Soft skills, hard skills, and how can a competency framework be tailored to fit any kind of specific needs of a particular business or sector? And how do we balance the need for those soft and hard skills while ensuring that we're adaptable and agile and in line with these new skills that are needed on a continuous basis?
So what I hear is I'm referring to them as quantitative and qualitative, or behavioral, and maybe from a business point of view, you're talking about soft and hard skills. I think in essence, we are talking about the same kind of thing. And I think the place and the weight of that on your scorecards and measuring what matters becomes quite complex, because I before you even answer this, Dr. Hamilton, John Dewar wrote a book, Measure What Matters. And I love this quote. He said, we must realize and act on this realization that if we try to focus on everything, we will achieve nothing. So what I'm hearing is, you know, instead of more and more and more and more, there's more of a sense of being quite discerning about what we measure. And to Jane's point, to bring that in, the balance between the
Okay, see on the group.
Sorry, there's a muting needed. There we go. This kind of like variance between the soft and the hard stuff. Is there any trends? Is there any highlights you can share with us?
100%. So we're talking in my language, functional skills or functional competencies and behavioral competencies. That's what we're talking about. It is my belief that if I get a good person behaviorally, I can teach them the functional skills. It is also my belief that if I find a functional guru with, lack of a better word, or horrible behavioral skills, it becomes far much difficult.
Toxic. Yeah.
Far much difficult to improve that behavior. So we are talking about the same thing. Where I'm focusing the most was saying on the functional side, yes, because it's easy to measure. But the culture of the organization determines what behavioral competencies are required. Now we have value systems or principles within the organizations. Do our people measure up to those values that you give them? If the answer is yes, cool. If the answer is no, then a development program to align as much as possible to those values, to that value system and that culture, will then become critical. From a functional perspective, you have to sell something, you measure sales. You train your salespeople to be better at what they do, you measure sales. You do not measure the number of days they've been tracked. You measure sales. So that's easy. When it comes to behavior, the measurement in a behavioral perspective is actually observation in terms of behavior. I'm yet to see a tool that says, are you happy? Yes. And that becomes true by saying yes. Do we have any issues at work? No. Is the answer. And that no becomes true automatically. I've yet to see that. I'm a strong believer on observations. I'm a strong believer on dialogue, because
Mm.
dialogue tends to give you more than the yes and the no answer, right? I'm also personally not a believer in weighting competencies and weighting
For that
skills.
big performance discussion that looms.
We shouldn't be having, in my books, performance discussions, because by the time I go there, I've already planned my defense mechanism against my manager. But we need to be having what we call developmental or career discussions. If I talk developmental discussions, I'm going to tell you where you need development. If I tell you where you need development, in hindsight, I'm telling you, you did not perform to the standard in that space. But it's positive. It's a dialogue of improvement, other than a dialogue of how much did I fail. So if we have dialogue, we will be able to understand our people better, more so than a questionnaire. It's my honest belief. I tend to be more a conversationalist rather than an interrogator. That allows people to actually tell you stuff that you even didn't want to know. But knowing it then helps build those development plans, build those development programs, and build those execution implementation plans of the development. Sorry, if I just add one thing, the risk that I foresee with waiting is this world is so dynamic. If delivering cash is 80% and then my behavior is 5% and this is that, I can deliver everything else and still be a worse person to work with. But because the weighting is low on the...
So little, it's negligible.
It's negligible. But the impact of my ill behavior actually is not just on the results, it's also on the team. So I can actually cause more damage because the weighting is lower. I'm just going to focus on the higher weighting that gives me whatever reward or recognition that I get. So we just need to be careful when we do weighting. It sometimes just perpetrate bad behaviors.
I agree. I think we love the fact that we can quantify something, because to a comment earlier in the chat box, what gets measured gets managed. So we tend to become so minutely focused on little percentage points that the overall way this person shows up is kind of like lost in the wayside. So I want to kind of like zoom back again, because I'm a systems thinker, and for me, it feels a little bit binary to say business measures, business purpose, and then the individual and their purpose and their gaps and how they show up, be it soft or hard skills. Do you think, and maybe looking at the Pareto principle or whatever principle we use in terms of the weightings of these measures, do you think everybody in the business need to have, for instance, my favorite topic, a consumer or an end user or a customer measure, just to get that alignment, because otherwise people might sit so far up in the value chain that this business purpose, why are we here? We are here for the end user, for the person that is willing to pay for our service, product, experience that we create. So in a sense, if we divorce the measures from the individual in terms of those, and it only becomes a commercial team's, let's say a sales team or a marketing team's effort, and then it gets diluted as we go downstream. Aren't we missing a beat here? Aren't we missing a very important lever? Because I've seen businesses, Dr. Hamilton, you know what I'm talking. I've seen businesses that would send a team overseas because they made their targets, yet the business didn't make it. Almost the silo mentality in terms of these businesses, and that they are not systemically integrated.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I spoke, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, I spoke to, I'm not going to mention name, I don't have permission to do so from him, and a CEO that we were just chatting about business. And what he mentioned, I'm going to repeat here to answer your question, is each and every employee in the organization should have a customer-focused objective. Whether you are sweeping, whether you are buying stationery, whatever you do.
Don't care what function you are sitting in.
We are
here for the same reason.
Yes. Remember when we started talking about business objectives, if we are talking about a product that we sell, somebody has to use it. So it doesn't matter if you've delivered the product. If it's sitting in the warehouse, we have not delivered the business objective, period. So from an L&D perspective, we ought to be able to say, how do we monitor this? How do we develop the skill at a lower level? It's easy to develop it if you are on the front line. It's difficult at the back line. But there are ways of developing the skill sets that is customer orientation. I'll give you one typical example. Every activity inside the business is a supply chain.
Absolutely.
Everyone, right? If I go buy stationery and then deliver it to a finance team, that's a supply chain. The finance team is my customer. So if I have to learn that and understand that and uphold that, that cascades itself to every point organization. So the silo mentality you're talking about is because we have lost the mentality of supply chain within the business. We think supply chain is getting stuff from the UK and from Trump and sent to South Africa.
Please don't bring the trade tariffs into this conversation, please.
Maybe we need some tariffs so we can force people to do this. But if we can get the mentality of supply chain in our processes within the business, we then build that customer focus key objective and develop people to programs to develop that and upskill people to manage that.
Makes sense, and I'm a big believer of that because I've seen the negative measure of that. I've seen when it doesn't happen, what is the unintended consequence in terms of a fragmented business that says, well, I'm okay, but you're not okay. As long as a part of the business is not okay, we are not okay.
Yeah.
And I think that goes, maybe, is it the same principle then from an individual versus a team measure? I always tell the businesses that I consult with it, most of your high potential people will be promoted out of their competence. So their technical ability becomes less relevant when they sit on Exco. I've been there. And that they literally have to almost get that skill set that's more about the leadership and the people enablement skills, creating those environments where people can do their best work. So in that sense, the superstar, the rock star, the person that shoots all the lights out in terms of these hard measures, these quantitative measures, might not be that person that, you know, supports the team as a systems thinker. 1 + 1 needs to be 5. The measure of the business is the product of our interaction. So it's not the bricks you're counting. You're counting the mortar between the bricks as well. So a big long sentence that asks, is it the same principle then from a team measure versus an individual measure on measuring what matters?
This is what I normally say. If you take care of business, business will take care of teams. Teams will take care of people, individuals. So never focus on yourself. Because if you focus on the business, yourself will be taken care of automatically. Whether it's career or whatever the case may be, do not go step on other people's toes for your career. Deliver the business requirement. The business will cascade down and take care of everybody else, including you. So you are also a supply chain. If I pass on information, me as an individual with my intellect into the team, that's supply chain. That team is my customer. I'm sharing my knowledge with the team. When that team shares their innovation with the business is a customer. That team is a supplier. It's still the same mentality.
Principle, yes.
Still the same customer.
It's almost like the whole is bigger than the parts. It makes
100%,
sense.
100%. Yeah. So we ought to be doing that way. You touch on something, I thought of something which might not be 100% relevant here. Jane, you can clap me later. It's a question of saying, not every intellectual person is going to be in the boardroom. Because some of us remain intellectual professionally, not in the leadership style. Let us continue doing that. Do not put us on the other side. And I might not be that intellectual in human resources, but I might be a good leader. Let me go that route. If we do that, we are in a position to then have an intellect person thinking leadership, and an executor thinking professional strategy, innovation, and so on. And that's the way we need to form those teams going forward.
It makes sense because what you are saying is that, you know, measuring potential is different than measuring technical competence in a specific role, because potential, and I think it speaks to the way we structure our businesses, because in the past, the only way to get to a higher pay grade was to be promoted in terms of leadership to the next level. And to your point, that is not what matters to everybody. And that shouldn't be the way you get to a position where you can actually, you know, excel. It should be, there should be enough leeway that an individual that does not maybe have that leadership potential still can feel like, you know, they can make a difference in the long term.
100%, 100%. The definition of potential in my head is not about what I do. It's about what I can do. I'm already doing my job right now. If I'm doing it well, it doesn't mean I have potential.
That's your day job, yeah.
I'm doing it very well. It means I'm an exceed performer. I may not be a potential. I might just be an exceed performer. To be potential, I must demonstrate that I can do beyond my level right now. And that's how we should be defining it. And if that's the case, and we've done a good job as an L&D fraternity to upskill towards succession, towards next level, then it all works well. We've developed you, you're demonstrating it, and that's logic. It becomes succession, business growth, and so on and so forth.
Makes sense. Ndilimeki, I want to thank you for all your comments. I'm seeing you in the chat box, and I think I want to change your question a little bit, if you will allow me to. You are asking the difference between micromanagement and how those boundaries need to be set in terms of healthy operations. So this is leadership style questions. I guess my question has more to do. We've been talking about toolboxes. I mean, the amount of information you shared with us, Dr. Hamilton, in terms of stuff that can be in your toolboxes. And unfortunately, a lot of that is leadership implicating. So it's almost like the individual has to close their gaps as per normal, but there's frameworks and governance and communicators and supply chain thinkers and stuff that we need to do from, you know, almost our agenda to lead a team. Aren't we just adding more and more and more and more? And I'm back at John Dewere's quote. It feels like we're never dropping any measures. We're just adding to it and just saying, yes, but you must do that too. And yes, you must put that framework in too. Is there any way we can focus and be a little bit more discerning?
100%. So I'm going to put it this way. Yes, think about all of it. Think about all of it and put it together. Then decide what you want to do. What you want to do is decided by what your intention of your business is. That's the only way. But you can't leave anything out, because in most cases, some are actually prerequisites of others. So you, as much as you're not going to do anything about it, you need to know about it. So I'm saying, let's think about it all. Let's understand it all. But when it comes to execution and implementation, what does my business need? That's the primary question. What does my business need?
And that's okay if it changes tomorrow. You can change it tomorrow. It's not
change it tomorrow. 100%. I mean, the world we're living in, it's so dynamic. What we say today could be a little bit different tomorrow. We ought to be that flexible. The true definition of agile, not working from home, but the true definition of agile is actually that, is be able to flex it tomorrow and be different if the business requires you to do so. So I believe that we need to understand it all and keep it in the toolbox, because you never know when to need it. But know for your business, these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things maximum that are imperative. And they may be imperative for 1 year and not the following year, because you ought to be moving forward.
You cycle, yes, you need a little bit of micromanagement now, but it will pass.
Yeah.
I hear
so
you.
Let's come back to micromanagement. Micromanagement, I don't think this is a Google or Oxford Dictionary definition. Micromanagement for me is a sign of a leader demonstrating lack of trust. That's number one. Or a sign of a leader demonstrating being uncomfortable with his or her own knowledge. It's got nothing to do with it. So
Makes sense.
it's a question of a leader having to do some form of introspection, as to say, I have Hamilton in here. I'm paying him this amount of money to do this job. Why can't I let him do it? It's because I'm uncomfortable. Why am I uncomfortable? It's an introspection. Leave Hamilton alone, do your introspection, and monitor Hamilton's delivery, the output.
I concur, and I think it has to do with that. We saw that during the pandemic, which is now almost 5 years in our taillights. We saw leaders of industry, like captains of industry, literally dropping levels of work in terms of control because the world was out of control. So for me, sometimes it is about the state of crisis the business might be in. You see leadership starting to drop because they feel more comfortable in control. But I've also seen that when you are promoted out of your competence. So your competence comes from your technical ability. So when in crisis, when you go into your shadow side, you tend to drop and do what you've always done well. And you do that so unconsciously that we don't even realize that, it's happening. So I hear you completely. I've seen that so many times.
Let's change the name then, micromanagement, and call it staff support. Exactly what you just said. Let's call it staff support. It sounds better than micromanagement.
It does.
Micromanagement it's got too many emotions to it of why are you doing it? Why he is doing it? Am I not doing very well? Am I missing something? We're just generating another problem. Let's call it staff support, employee support, because we're in crisis, because we have a deadline, because of whatever. So we are supporting one another as colleagues. Let's put it that way. Let's throw away micromanagement.
I like it. Reframe it.
Let's give it a new name.
I think we need to start thinking about wrapping up. I don't know if I missed any big questions, Jane, if there's anything. I know there's a lot.
Anna Marie, yes. So two comments. One, we have just discussed micromanaging, and in general, there does seem to be a couple of questions around how to manage our managers, how to convince them that our working style is okay, how to convince them that we're hitting targets so we can work in a way that suits us as a new generation, how to convince leaders that how we operate is a way that will yield results. So that's sort of one part of.
It's almost like convincing or having influence over your system to say, this is the way. I hear you. And I think I'm pausing this one because I think there's a lot of leadership conversations here. And Dr. Hamilton, we tend to vary onto the leadership side of measuring what matters. And I think we set it up like that because we realize that a lot of this work that we're talking about sits in the leadership side and not necessarily the individual that joins the company. So I want to frame what Jane is saying with all the comments and maybe ask it from a holistic point of view. Traditionally, to your point earlier, these measures of success tended to have been it could feel quite punitive. It's like we're picking the stick up, now it's our time to hit you and to give you that feedback as per your conversationalist word earlier today. Any tips for leaders in terms of making this more motivational and inspirational, almost like, wow, I've got a growth opportunity here, versus this, okay, you did not do that by 0.225, you did not show up in that way, or the business did not deliver. There's a huge sense of trepidation that comes with measuring what matters.
I think it's not so much about measuring. It's about how you set it up first. If I don't set it up, if I don't talk about it, and I come and tell you a year later that you did not deliver something, then it is punitive.
It is punitive, yeah.
If me and you sit down at the beginning of the measuring term, let's say beginning of a financial year, and we discuss what we believe this business needs to move forward, and my contribution to that belief, then we are already together in the same journey. When it comes to the end and we have not delivered it, it is no longer punitive. We have failed to deliver it. And the truth of the matter is, we would have known every month when we slip up every month would have known that we're not making it. And there would have been a discussion somewhere around to say, hey, we are not making it. What do we do to make it? Remember, measuring has got nothing to do with failure. Measuring is to ensure that we do not fail. So if it looks like we are failing, we need to change course. We need to come up with a plan. We need to do something different. Now, L&D is an enabler for these KPIs. Because if I'm busy with my KPIs and I'm struggling, then we should be saying, Hamilton, what skills do we require here to make sure that you do not fail? And we come in, we do that program, we do that training, we do that on the job or exposure, whatever it is, so that I can deliver. It is not punitive when it's done like that. It only becomes punitive when you just call me in the office for a performance review and tell me I didn't make it. And then, by the way, you're not getting a bonus because you didn't make it. Then it is.
That's the part. That's the elephant in the room that we're not talking about yet, but we will. Thank you for
And
that.
I know we're very short on time, but if I may
Yes.
please squeeze one last question in. I feel it fitting that we started with Pumi's question, so we're going to finish with his. He, in summary, wants to know what exactly are we measuring, and he's listed them very easily for us. Are we measuring profit, customer complaints, or staff retention, or all three? And how we feel about L&D and HR sitting at the table together. I think that's a great question to end on.
I think just to keep it away from specifics, because I'm very aware of the variety in this room and very aware of the different sectors and the different parts of the businesses that are represented. Any comments in general, Dr. Hamilton, based on Pumi's?
I was going to take two things or three things that are common, irrespective of who you are in the room. Number one is sales or revenue. That's what we measure. We have a number to deliver as a business. We know how many people we need. We know what skill sets we need. Do they have it? If they don't have it, we upskill them. If we have upskilled them correctly and we deliver revenue numbers, correct, we've ticked the box. We can measure revenue in relation to L&D initiatives. The second one, quickly, is productivity, the most simplest one. If I'm running a production line and I'm not delivering, why am I not delivering? If we understand that, we might need a very, very quick crash course on operations.
Adjusting certain things, yeah.
Yeah, I will monitor that, and then I will measure my productivity, which is a sign of my L&D intervention has paid its dues. The last one, just in summary, is waste. Why do I always cause waste? Why is there, I'm not talking waste as in material, I sometimes talk waste as in space.
Yes.
If we educate
resource
people,
redundancy, yes.
Right, all of that. So if you train people to manage that, you can monitor waste and measure waste and correlate that back into the L&D initiatives. I can make a long list, but those are the most common across
I like that, because you are talking
organizations.
about effectiveness and efficiency. Both of those measures are in there, which is
100%.
very helpful.
100%.
I have 100 more questions. I wanted to ask you what now, what's coming, but I need to finish off, and I really think this is a very necessary conversation that has so many implications and so many branches that we can discover. And I want everybody in this room to know that your chats and your comments mean a lot. It tees us up for the other two community of practice sessions which are coming. Please look out for them. From SBS-ED's point of view, these are very valuable conversations, collaborative conversations where thought leaders can come together and we can really purposefully look at being helpful as a business school. But my deepest gratitude to you, Dr. Hamilton, for so generously sharing your insights and your thoughts. I feel like we need to have coffee afterwards, because I now need to debrief. Because you are really, the business side of your thinking comes through so beautifully. And you have said that you've been consistent in terms of, saying, let's start with the whole and then we can look at the parts. And you demonstrated that for me. So thank you so much for sharing this platform with me. And then last but not least, to SBS-ED and all my colleagues. Look at all those beautiful maroon backgrounds there. Maureen, Amira, Sandizwe, I see Lauren, I see all our colleagues, and obviously Jane, Kerry, all the people, Chanel, all the guys from who specifically helped us to set this up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what matters. So let's not stop talking. Thanks, everybody. Have a beautiful afternoon. Thanks for sharing your time. We really appreciate it. Thanks, Pumi. Thanks, everybody.
You.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.